Hi, Gozang from France. This is Peter Hill broadcasting from Australia. Sorry for any mispronunciation of your name. Never seen the name before. Went on Google. That's the best my ears could pick up. It's very interesting. So we've got sort of some commonalities of the interest in teaching. I also was a teacher, and part of what I'm doing is teaching to camera. I'm part of this slow rehab. It's a little another story about where I'm slowly learning to podcast and slowly giving lessons online. Now, I'm not going straight online at the moment. I'm just talking about topics and sending it to friends. So just so happens that your email about Hill's constructive counters came just when I was about to actually go onto this topic. So there are sort of two or three areas that I'm doing rehab on. So one is just reading scripts or reading books online, and then doing a summary of it, and then teaching some maths and physics concepts online, and then branching off to video, which you're seeing now. Now, you wrote about Hill's constructive counters, and it just so happens that just yesterday I went to the firebox and got the counters out of the firebox ready for a sort of focused discussion, not with the general internet, but with general people I'm working through ideas with. And so I have the Hills constructive counters here, and a few other things related to them, or the next generation, so they make sense in this other work that I'm coming up. So it just so happens that this is ready for you. Now, when I say firebox, Australia's obviously been ravaged by bushfires, and pretty well, or most of the population have a box which they put the most precious stuff in, and so they can whip it out to their car and drive away when they're told to evacuate. So it's a little bit different from other countries. We are given evacuation orders and we just have to leave. So if you're told it's a likely evacuation order, everyone has their firebox, and so this particular thing is the firebox. I'm sure you want to see it. Now, unfortunately, it's beginning to fall apart a little bit, and so this is one section of it, and there is I'll restore it to it, and I'll show you that's one section of it. And here's a box of the 1923 Hills constructive counters. I'll take off the lid. That's hard to see. Yeah, and show you the actual counters here. Now, there's an important story about them. Here they are, 1 inch by 1 inch, and that's a unit. And there's a half unit and tens and stuff like that. And I think this is perhaps the last one in existence, but there used to be lots and lots of them in Australia. And I want to give a little bit of a story of the context of it. I know that you're looking at how it related to other sets of counters, and it did relate to other sets of counters. So Richard Hill, my grandfather, was an educational psychologist in Tasmania, the Southern Island, and there's a little bit of reference to Tasmania, Tasmanian devils, and all that type of stuff. So he married someone called Shirley. Is it Mildred Shirley? I can't. I should remember it. But she was Errol Flynn's piano teacher, and there was Arthur Shirley went over to Hollywood. This is just a sort of aside going across, and there's Errol Flynn and Rudolph Valentino. There's a little bit of a story associated with this, but just he has published, so there's publications of him in the way back, and so he was an educational psychologist. He came up with those, and he's written a book on how they're taught, and there's some critiques and stuff like that. And there's been a lot of research on those particular blocks because he marketed them right up to the Great Depression. had relationships with the education department. And when the Great Depression struck, Australia did this thing. It repatriated all its money to Britain. So the cash drained out of Australia went up to Britain. It had no effect on Britain whatsoever, but it destroyed the Australian economy, and we had 36% unemployment. It was a very serious depression, and he went into the education department, and there was the various, I suppose, problems of an academic person being a principal and going through there. Now, I'm just going to really rush through the story here. So this was important because one of the key people he taught with these constructive counters, well, firstly, they're black and white, and they've naturally went to digital or binary education. Part of binary education went to my father, who was at 17-year-old, was Australia's first computer programmer, because he was involved in building Australia's first computer, the fourth computer in the world. And he went on to develop various things like computer music. So that set of blocks is integral to the story of computer music. And so there's sort of a revision of history to say, oh no, the Americans didn't invent computer music. It was down to this particular laboratory. And fortunately, they kept the tapes and reconstructed, and it's been thoroughly researched. So there's that in computer programming, the digital age. So it's really important to go across. Now, I do have here some other further developments from only the little fragments of it here, so I'll sort of show it here. And these are called, I think I do have a full set of cards here, but these are another block cards. These are tent cards. So that's there you go. Log, my godfather. She is. These are logarithmic cards, logarithmic blocks. I forgot about this. So this is times 10 divided by 10. There's another version of it, I think, in there with with non-logarithmic. So if I go like that, that's 10. If I had 10 divided by 2, there'd be a times 5. 10 divided by 8 is a non-unit type of stuff. So it's the logarithmic cards. And so these are tent cards developed, and I'll talk about them. So I developed them as a natural progression from it. There's also I took these out expecting them not to be logarithmic cards. So I was a bit shocked by it. I really haven't had a chance to go through all what I call props. So they're a series of cards. So this is teaching addition and subtraction, teaching logarithms, and I was involved in teaching my own children resources, and from the resources of the education department there was a particularly poor thing on teaching fractions, and I've developed fraction cards. Now I can't obviously, or there's sort of restrictions in Australia of showing anything to do with children, so I do have pictures of it being used with children and stuff like that. I'll be able to send the picture if you are interested. I'll be able to show you the pictures of these tent cards and these fraction cards. These are brilliant fraction cards because it teaches up to the next level of algebra, the conceptualization of it. So I do have some other props here, and they just happen to be here in part of the actual talking. So this is the essential idea from 23 was, or 1920 it was a kit that you could bring in, and teaching embedded was the expertise is embedded there, and this is to do with numbers. It was a general point to allow your head. Now there's other plans ahead called the Worldwide Museum. This is teaching scales, and if you are interested in that, I'll send a link to it. And this is where you turn the entire surface of the Earth into a galactic schoolroom. That is by featuring on these key scales. 1 to a trillion scale, the Sun appears like a little cashew. I think it may even be French. It sounds French. It's a tiny little ball bearing. It's 1.3 millimeters across and 1 to a trillion scale. And if you are interested, I'll include you in the rollout of that. It may not be your area of interest. So there's that aspect. There's also the extension of the principle behind it. So the principle was not like if you focus just on the math and the teaching, it's not there. There was another idea of short-circuiting, bypassing teachers with advanced maths training where they could offer a manual and go across. So what I have here is this is a box, and this is the next generation of the Hills constructive counters. And in this box is a box you can take into the classroom. It's battery powered, got GPS, wireless location. It's got a what is it? Electronic printing, electronic ink label. So at the end, it can actually give it a new shipping address and ship itself anywhere off in the world. So this is on steroids. So the boxes now can ship themselves around, diagnose themselves, and interact with students before they appear and get to know who the students are. So I'll just may explain that a bit more. So this one here is one, I don't know if you can see it from this angle. It's got a little duck in it, a dance floor, and it's not battery powered, but I'm just going to open it up. And canard, that's a canard, I think is the French. Solenoid is French for rod, I think so. Just going across, so that little duck is in there, and what happens is that when you press the button on the outside of it, it begins to duck begins to dance to Doctor Who music. Now this in actual fact was designed by children. It's got the advanced science in it of teaching solenoids and electrons, but it's to go ahead. So this is if you are interested in the overall generic principles that was founded with this, the box there is a box with expertise, and there was an entire teaching system. So rather than just looking at the maths and the psychology there's a psychology which is extended to include the teachers. So that's one thing there, and this is what we're just quietly developing here in Australia, and we're sort of decoupled from the startup mentality. That is, you've got to have a market and someone to share and stuff like that. We've gone a long distance ahead and said, what are the critical points? It is the word is probably feeble-minded teachers, sort of intellectual feebleness in your teaching section, and how to short-circuit that. That's the big viewpoint. And looking at reconstruct, there's another model to reconstruct bypasses. So what I'm going to show here, coming up. Now I just happen to have these here because I'm going to do a sort of private rehab chat. It's an in detail thing. Now this here is a similar box, but in it is the fabled Einstein-de Haas pendulum. So normally this takes a fairly big laboratory to work out, but here in Australia we've worked out how to cancel out the key error, mechanically cancel out the key error point, and in a box from the Hills constructive counters a long distance away, we've got something which shows, I should show it to you. It's got, show it to you again. I've got here, you've got magnetic coils there. I don't know if you can see two magnetic coils. It's got a ferrite rod inside it, and that rod twists. This is due to, I'm still trying to work out how to not make the maths advanced, but due to its matrix algebra spin. It's the basic torque of the magnetic field, something that Einstein struggled to do right here. But the idea is a box which goes into the classroom, can actually speak with with students directly, can actually physically speak with teachers directly. So I've done some work to support my rehabilitation by doing lots of podcasts. I do remember doing a podcast reading through the Hill's constructive counter theory there. I can't locate them, and I do remember scanning it, so I'll get those two things for you. And what I'll do is I'll just put the background material. Some of these things unfortunately I can't put in-house footage of children interacting with this because I don't have the permissions. It was just done for research, but I will be able to put in a few documentaries, a few links, and just hope the best on your way. There have been many researchers over the years looking at this aspect. They've been more touched by actually using it for a while or looking at it, and it's, we can I can give you some criticism from Rich Till of the Cuisenaire rods. He particularly didn't like the Cuisenaire rods, the association of colour, how you associate colour, and like I am a quantum physicist, and there is a use of colour for indicating complex phase, but it's not useful in teaching rods. So Cuisenaire rods were favoured by the education system, but it's very much typical of bigger business and research interests, and a model, model where you give a backhander to the people in government to push things forward. But one day, I think Hill's constructive counters may make a comeback, simply for a number of reasons. I think there may be an option in many years' time for them to have a comeback. Perhaps, I'm sure it will be, this is the 100th anniversary of the patent, but I think there's some basic advantages in terms of the base counting, the black and white, the philosophy behind it, that is superior to other more complex systems out there, other base systems out there. And it's obviously leads to counting and various things. We just have to get across the fact that they're beautiful, heavy wooden, they're beautiful, heavy blocks, ideal for kids. They've got some sort of substance, some sort of feel, some sort of weight. So if you put two in your hand, they weigh things. They weigh twice as much. They're at a kid's size, so a centimetre is a little bit too small to do that. But they're not good for class sets. So Cuisenaire rods are great for class sets and that type of stuff. So look, I'll get this off, and I won't edit it I won't edit it at all. This is a pre-run, and I'll use this to check for any technical difficulties for the podcasts that I have to not podcasts, videos, but again, in-house training videos or rehabilitation videos. I'll give a little bit more to it. It is interesting to actually track the succession of people involved in it, and the conditions involved in it. It's part of Australia. It's almost impossible to explain to someone overseas in France. Good luck to you guys in France. We're all quietly looking at you, sort of figuring out, the suffering that Italy, Germany, France, and Britain is going through, and Spain. It's a very tough gig to get through. So our sympathies from down under, and we'll always be friends.